Okay, we're at chapter 4. I will put a disclaimer if essay bothers you or any type of abuse that may allude to that, then this is not going to be the chapter that you want to listen to. This is not going to be a chapter that you want to read in the book. If you do decide to read the book, I would recommend that you bypass this chapter in particular. Now, I won't be going into full detail and discrediting everything that she says in this chapter just because it is essay and because it is a very touchy topic, and I don't really like to discredit most victims in regards to that. The chapter starts off with how Gypsy's mother had warned her about men, how Dee Dee just had a general dislike for men, and about how her grandfather was completely touchy-feely with her, and how she felt like all grandfathers were supposed to be like that. It goes into detail about how after the uncle situation, they had moved in with Claude and Dee Dee's stepmother, Laura. Apparently, Dee Dee had hated Laura, and the reason for her dislike for Laura was because Claude had married so soon after Dee Dee's mother's passing. So her mother passed at the age of 59, and I guess Dee Dee felt like this was too soon for him to move on that quick. And apparently Laura didn't like Dee Dee either. They worked at the hospital together, and that they would act out all the time. So once again, Gypsy alluded to her mother being the issue and why they were having such issues in the first place, her and Laura. Dee Dee had told Gypsy, I guess Dee Dee just tells Gypsy all these things at such a young age, that the reason why she did not like Laura was because Laura had got into her work locker and stole a picture of her and Gypsy's father's wedding picture and had ripped Dee Dee out of it and ripped Dee Dee completely up and then threw that ripped up picture back into the work locker. But I do remember that I seen a wedding picture or a picture of Dee Dee and Rod together at the crime scene. If you look on one of the walls, there's a whole collage of them together with Gypsy, and I believe I did see a wedding picture on that wall as well. I'd have to go back and look, but I believe so. And apparently the whole family denies that Claude was ever essaying anyone, including Gypsy. Gypsy brings up the interview that her grandfather had with a TV station, that Gypsy was the one who had tried to touch him, and that she had tried to do this at the age of 4, and he had kind of told her to go away, kind of shoot her off. She alluded to the fact that she had seen her mother and her grandfather at the age of 5 get into a claw bathtub, and she said that the reason that they fit was because not Gypsy, but Dee Dee was a lot smaller then. That after they were done bathing each other, taking turns washing each other's back, Dee Dee had put Gypsy in the bathtub with her grandfather, and that he said that he was going to wash her, and I quote, pecan. And that just really, the question I have with that is the previous chapter, she alluded that her mother would have known that he was essaying her if she would have just let her play with Barbie dolls. So about her mother's accident, when she had her accident, she had to have screws and bolts put into her leg. The bone fusion didn't go as what doctors had expected, so therefore Dee Dee had suffered with chronic pain in her leg throughout the rest of her life. She had a lot of issues walking, and she had been prescribed pain medication, which Gypsy said that's the reason why she became addicted to these pain medications. She brings up a point in this chapter where her and her mother had slept in a pull-out couch. She said that her grandfather had tried to touch Gypsy and that Dee Dee had pushed her grandfather away, but you'll find out later in the chapter that Gypsy goes to her mother and tells her, and her mother has a breakdown and cries with her, and she tells her she's sorry and everything, but wouldn't she had known at that point? Now, I'm not questioning, I'm not saying that this did not happen, it's just weird that in multiple points of this chapter it's back and forth. She didn't know, she did know, she didn't know, she did know. Gypsy brings up the point at the age of 9 that she began to get a feeding tube, and she stated that it wasn't like the Hulu show, The Act, that it wasn't meals that would be processed and put through the feeding tubes, it was more like water and medication. She stated when she was first in prison that she was 92 pounds at the age of 22, but she said in chapter 1 she was 24. But she was really 23, almost 24 when she was arrested, and it's stated in her records, her arrest records, that she was actually between the weight of 96 to 100 pounds, which would have put her at a healthy weight. 92 would have put her at a little bit underweight, not at a scary rate like weight, but below average weight. She brought up the fact that Claude was more like a dad to her since her dad was never around, so therefore she is blaming kind of like her dad for the situation as well. She brings up stories about how Claude would essay her by picking her up and carrying her like a wife type of relationship to a closet, and she said that Laura, the step grandmother, wouldn't notice because she would have these pass out faint type situations where she was just not all there, and that Claude would pull up her nightgown and essay her. She would go into detail about how she told her mother, and her mother cried, and that her mother apologized to her and told her that was the reason why she didn't like men like her father and Claude, because they were both abusive to her, which in reality is kind of sad that her mother had refused to get in intimate relationships with men because she had been hurt so much in the past. Kind of brings a little bit of light to Dee Dee and how she was harmed, and maybe why she was so protective, maybe overprotective of Gypsy. I've always thought that Dee Dee didn't suffer Munchausen, but maybe a health anxiety by proxy, because she was so protective of Gypsy in the first place, that she was worried that anything that would happen to Gypsy, she would lose Gypsy. And she was so close to Gypsy that she loved her more than anything. That's what I got from it. That's the end of that chapter. I didn't really want to go into full detail, but that's basically everything that happened. I do find it to be sad if this all happened, but there is parts in this chapter where it's jumped back and forth, that her mother knew, her mother didn't know, Claude did this at this time, but Claude actually started at this time. So there is a little bit of a misunderstanding, but I'm not going to fully discredit, but that's basically what's in the chapter. Hopefully chapter 5 is a lot better than this one. I will actually ask one question. If all these things happened to you as a child and you knew that they were wrong and it hurt you, why would you dress up as a little girl and call yourself Kitty and engage as a child with grown men? That's the only real question I have in regards to this chapter about your past, because you did do these things and you had talked to grown men and you knew that it was wrong and it was perverted and perverse of them. That's the only question I really have.